In the aftermath of the Battle of the Black Gate and the destruction of the One Ring, Aragorn was returning to Gondor to be duly crowned as King Elessar, having been given the name by Galadriel on May 1st TA 3109. The ceremony was vast in nature, with people from all over Middle-earth coming to witness the events. Faramir met with the soon-to-be king outside the walls of the city, before announcing the return of the king to his people. "Here is Aragorn, son of Arathorn, chieftain of the Dunedain of Arnor, captain of the host of the West, bearer of the Star of the North, wielder of the sword reforged, victorious in battle, whose hands bring healing, the Elfstone, Elessar of the line of Valindir, Isildur's son, Elendor's son of Numenor. Shall he be king and enter into the city and dwell there?" And all those gathered cried approval aloud in one voice, allowing Aragorn to once more enter the city he had saved not long before, this time not only as a healer, but also as king. Frodo was given the honour of carrying the crown, and Gandalf then placed the wings of pearl and silver, which formed the likeness of a seabird, upon Aragorn's head. Faramir, who was now the steward of Gondor, cried aloud, "Behold the king!" a cry which was taken up once more by the populace of the city in one voice. With this, King Elessar entered the city to the ringing of silver trumpets as the royal banner was unfurled from the highest tower in the city. As we learn of these last battles in the war and the fate of its heroes, you might want to achieve a similar legacy yourself. For that, we have a special deal from our sponsor, Vikings War of Clans. It's a game that's both an MMO strategy game with PvP and PvE elements, and a city builder, where your goal is to fight to the top of a Viking-themed world, doing real diplomacy with other players. You build up a town with various buildings that bring you resources and recruitment options. Then you form a mighty army and head out to engage in the endless contests of the age, using strategy and alliance to rise up the ranks and prove yourself as a hero of the Viking Age. Right now is a perfect time to join the game. They've got big competitions with special rewards ongoing, and August 10th is their 7th anniversary, with tons of offers, events, rewards and discounts being handed out. Then August 19th to 20th is the Battle for the Throne competition, with trophies and rewards up for grabs. And every 2 days for all of August, there are Blitz competitions, on top of the Reign the Wardener Infernal competition starting August 1st. Basically, there's a lot to do right now, and every Tuesday and Wednesday you get buffs that speed up development, very useful if you're new. Use our link in the description or the QR code on screen to get the game for free, and you'll also get a pile of bonus rewards. Several months later, a company of elves led by Elrond came to the city. He handed over to Aragorn the symbol of royalty in Arnor, the Scepter of Anúminas, confirming his status as King of Arnor. Shortly afterward, Aragorn and Arwen were married, with the new Queen of Gondor and Arnor renouncing her immortality for the love she bore the greatest of the line of Isildur. Aragorn became the 26th King of Arnor and the 35th King of Gondor, and the first High King of the reunited kingdom. He would found the House of Telconta and rule until the year 120 of the Fourth Age. Soon after this, a great host led by Aragorn went north, and while the king and the rest of the Fellowship stopped in Rivendell, Gandalf and the hobbits continued onward to the Shire. Dark events transpired in the region in the dying days of the War of the Ring, while the Fellowship was in the south. Using the money earned from selling pipeweed to the wizard Saruman, a relative of Bilbo and Frodo, Lotho Sackville Baggins, initiated a massive land grab, allowing him to take the place of Chief of the Shire. The former White Wizard sent Dunlendings and Goblin men, who the locals started calling ruffians, to assist in this process, providing the necessary support to maintain rule over the hobbits, who were left without protection when the Dunedain went south to support Aragorn. Following the defeat of Sauron, Saruman used the power of his voice, which was one of the last elements of magic he could yet control, to convince Treebeard to allow him to leave the Tower of Isengard. Then, Saruman, under the guise of Sharky, came to the Shire, accompanied by Grima Wormtongue, quickly deposing and imprisoning the former chief and taking direct control over his new dominion. He had begun to turn the once content and peaceful region into an industrialized area, similar to what he had achieved in Isengard. However, Frodo, Sam, Merry and Pippin arrived just in time to thwart his plans to despoil the region, in what became known as the Scouring of the Shire. Before entering the Shire, Gandalf, Frodo and company stayed the night in the Prancing Pony in Bree, and were informed by Barlam and Butterbur that the situation had changed. Strange and harsh men from the south had begun to settle around Bree, much to the discontent of men and hobbits who had previously lived in the area. This culminated in a fight on the streets of Bree, where Saruman's forces, led by Bill Ferny, were driven out by the men of Bree, led by Matt Heathertoes. Gandalf then took the hobbits to the edge of the Shire before leaving to meet with Tom Bombadil, assuring his companions that their training and experiences during the War of the Ring would mean they would meet the challenge with which they were about to be posed. The four hobbits, upon arriving in the Shire, were shocked to see what had become of the home they had fought for so long to protect during the prior events of the War of the Ring. Having grown much in terms of courage and strength throughout their travels, the returning hobbits soon took up a leadership role, rousing all who wished to put an end to Sharky's cruelty. Prior to this mustering, the leadership of Saruman's ruffians challenged Frodo's authority, but when challenged by the blades of the hobbits, fled, allowing Merry to make use of the Horn of Rohan given to him by Theoden to great effect. Moving swiftly, a force of Shire folk was assembled in short order and made what preparations they could to meet the forces of the disgraced former wizard. In total there were 200 Bucklanders, 100 Tooks, and a number of locals supplementing this company, which had to face 150 ruffians. What came next would be known as the Battle of Bywater, and it occurred on November 3rd, TA 3019. As Pippin was still a Knight of Gondor, and wasn't released from his oath by Aragorn, this could also be seen as the first battle in the restoration of Arnor. At this point, the Shire was still a part of the realm of Arnor, allowing the hobbits to engage in combat with the will of the High King of the Dunedain behind them. After being initially rebuked, the leader of the ruffians returned with a larger force. However, they were promptly surrounded, and when he attempted to assault Merry, he was struck down by 4 arrows from the ever-effective archers of the Shire. They displayed the same strength which had allowed them to aid the King of Gondor as far back as the Battle of Fornost. The rest of the ruffians were then arrested and imprisoned. More men were dispatched by Sharky. However, the Hobbit forward scouts gave the members of the Fellowship sufficient time to prepare a defense of Bywater. Merry and Pippin took charge, utilizing everything they had learned during their service in the employ of the King of Rohan and Steward of Gondor. Makeshift roadblocks were prepared using carts and wagons, and when the ruffians arrived, they entered the center of the built-up area only to find they had been entrapped. The advantages of their greater stature and strength compared to an individual hobbit were eliminated in this way. Attempting a breakout, many were struck down by the deadly volleys of arrows loosed by the hobbits, and those who successfully broke through their entrapment were promptly surrounded and cut down. Sam, Merry and Pippin took an active role in the combat, displaying their martial prowess and inspiring their fellow Shirefolk to hold the line, even though they were not comparable in terms of strength. Frodo meanwhile did not fight, but instead ensured that every ruffian who threw down their arms and surrendered was not slaughtered, but instead imprisoned and treated fairly. The battle was a resounding victory for the Shirefolk, as only 19 hobbits were killed with 30 wounded, compared to the 70 ruffians who were killed and 12 captured, while the remainder of Sharky's men fled the Shire. The following day, Frodo and the other hobbits led their force to Hobbiton to confront Sharky, discovering it was in fact Saruman. The wizard was now powerless, and Frodo exiled him, granting him his life if he was to leave the Shire and never return. Saruman, having been forever tainted by his former master Sauron, responded with characteristic cruelty, decrying the weakness of the hobbits before viciously kicking Grima Wormtongue. This was too much for the former man of Rohan, whose patience broke, and he lunged for the former despot of the Shire, slitting his throat. Before Frodo could stop them, the archers of the Shire reacted, piercing Grima with multiple arrows and ending his life immediately. This was the last military engagement of the War of the Ring. The War of the Ring had far-ranging ramifications for every nation in Middle-earth, none more so than that of Gondor. Aragorn went on to rebuild the Kingdom of Arnor after so many years of decay. fostering close relations with the other realms of men, dwarves and elves, among them Dale and Erebor, who continued to prosper in the Fourth Age. He also successfully campaigned alongside his chief commanders Imrahil and Éomer against the Easterlings and Haradrim, forever ending the threat posed by them. The three men led campaigns beyond the Sea of Ruin, enforcing peace with the Easterlings who dwelt there. Campaigns to the south were also conducted, with the dual might of Gondor and Rohan forcing the men of Harad to give up their possessions in southern Gondor. Likewise, an assault was made on the city of Umbar, which Aragorn had last entered while serving under Denethor's father under the guise of Thorongil. The Corsairs of Umbar were utterly routed, and the port city, which had been founded by the Númenóreans so many centuries prior, was returned to its holdings, with the remaining black Númenóreans who resided there seemingly killed also, bringing an end to their destructive legacy since the fall of Númenor. The Orcs had also been reduced to insignificant mountain bands following the destruction of the Dark Lord, and the United Kingdom, not that one, reached its greatest territorial extent since Elendil first arrived in the west, ensuring there were no longer any true threats to the High Kingship. Aragorn maintained Minas Tirith as his capital, leading to a quick repopulation of the region, reconstructed Annúminas to serve as his northern capital, and rebuilt Fornost Arrayne from the ruins of the Desolation of the Witch King, constructing a great city in which many men came to reside. The kingdom of Arnor once more prospered, as the corruption wrought by the Great War in the north was finally cleansed from the region, and it would once more regain the strength it had once possessed at its height. Minas Morgul was razed to the ground, as its corruption would take many years to be fully cleansed from the former joint fortresses of Gondor, with a new holding being built in the Emen Arnen for Faramir and Éowyn to dwell within. Osgiliath was once more rebuilt, also regaining the splendour which had initially made it the first capital of the kingdom, becoming more and more populous as the reign of Elessar continued. Aragorn named Faramir Prince of Ithilien, marrying Éowyn, and the Shire was given independent status from the newly re-established realm of Arnor under the sceptre of Annúminas. The king even added the Westmarch to its territory, decreeing that no man was ever to enter into the Shire again, himself included. Even after Aragorn's death, following 120 years of wise rule and the accession of his son, Eldarion, the descendants of this line would continue to rule wisely and well, maintaining the golden age started by their patriarch, following on from the flames of war. Meanwhile, Arwen would die just a year after her husband of a broken heart and was buried at Cerin Amroth in Lorien. In Rohan, Éomer assumed the throne, marrying his dear friend Imrahil's daughter, Lothiriel, who he had fallen in love with during his stay in Gondor. He would prove a gallant ally to the Gondorians in the campaigns that followed, ensuring the Oath of Yorl would continue in perpetuity. Isengard was granted to the Ents, who filled in Saruman's pits and reforested the area, renaming it the Treegarth of Orthanc. While in the Glittering Caves, which Gimli had been forced to take refuge in during the Battle of Helm's Deep, permission was given by Éomer for him to set up a Dwarven colony there, which prospered for many years due to the mineral wealth of the caves. The Balrog, being now defeated, also allowed the Longbeard Dwarfs under Durin VII to retake Khazad Dûm after so many years exiled from their holds. Legolas would go on to found a colony in Ithilien, while his father Thranduil, alongside Celeborn and Galadriel, purged Dol Guldur of corruption and created a land for the Beornings to reside. However, the destruction of the One Ring ensured the decline of the elves, as the Three Rings began to fade in power, causing the kingdoms which had been preserved by them to fade also. This caused a mass exodus of elves across the sea to Valinor, with all three of the ring-bearers departing. Lorien was eventually abandoned, with the elves of Lothlorien who did not depart moving to the southern part of Mirkwood, founding the realm of East Lorien. The majority of the elves of Rivendell also departed, leaving only Elrond's sons, Celeborn, and a small population of elves to inhabit the region. Eventually, Celeborn, whose heart yearned for Galadriel, took passage to the Undying Lands with his company, and it is said that with him went the last living memory of the elder days in Middle-earth. Frodo never truly recovered from his wounds, and upon finishing his version of The Lord of the Rings in the Red Book of Westmarch in the year of the Third Age 3021, joined Bilbo and Gandalf, who by now had achieved all that was required of him in Middle-earth, as well as Elrond and Galadriel aboard an elven ship. Frodo and Bilbo were allowed passage to the Undying Lands as they were ring-bearers, in the hopes of healing the damage to their spirit that bearing the ring had caused. Sam married Rosie Cotton, having 13 children with her, and was elected Mayor of the Shire for 7 consecutive 7-year terms, before in the year 61 of the Fourth Age, leaving to take a ship to the Undying Lands as a former ring-bearer to join Frodo in Valinor. Meanwhile, Merry became the Master of Buckland in the year 11 of the Fourth Age, living at Brandy Hall and also Crickhollow, and in the year 13 of the Fourth Age, Pippin became the 32nd Thane of the Shire, a position he maintained for 40 years, before renouncing it in the year 63 of the Fourth Age, when he revisited Rohan and Gondor with Merry. Merry was 102 years old at this stage, and died in Gondor not long after arriving, being laid to rest in Gondor. Pippin died not long after, and was laid to rest with Merry in Gondor. After the great King Elessar died in the year 120 of the Fourth Age, Merry and Pippin were entombed next to him. After Aragorn's death, Legolas and Gimli left their respective colonies in the hands of their people. The pair, that had grown incomprehensibly close despite initial frictions between them, then went west, where Legolas built one last ship at the Havens to take them across the sea towards Valinor. In doing so, Gimli became the first and only ever dwarf to make his way to the Undying Lands. Neither of them was ever seen again in Middle-earth, and lived in Valinor with their old friends to the very dying days of the world. This video brings us to the end of the War of the Ring. We sincerely hope you enjoyed this series on the world of Middle-earth, and hope to return to Tolkien's work in the future. We're planning to cover the battles of many other fantasy, sci-fi and space opera universes, so make sure you have subscribed and pressed the bell button. Please consider liking and sharing, as it helps immensely, and don't forget to comment. We will try to read every comment, as we want to know what you think about this video and which videos you hope to see in the future. This is the Wizards and Warriors channel, and we'll catch you on the next one.